Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to see you again. As always, thanks for programming the show with your questions. You do that by going to officehours.global. One little note before we dive into our questions, and that's Eclipse coverage that we're going to be doing. We are very excited, and we have two people on the show in our second hour today to tell you everything you want to know about the Eclipse. We're very excited about this here at Office Hours, so that's going to be coming up. But right now, your questions are the start of the show, so we're going to dive in. Josh, what's our first question this morning?
Douglas Carmichael is next. Capturing sound effects for electronic music and sound design, would a Zoom-type stereo recorder work best, or would there be something else that would work better?
Marty Adius is going to help us. Marty? Whoops, you're muted, Marty.
Sorry. On that kind of recorder, there's the microphones that are built into the unit, and then there's the recorder itself. The recorder itself is a stereo digital recorder. Might even have multiple tracks, more than 2 tracks, depending on the model. In terms of capturing, it depends on what kind of sound effects you're looking to capture and where they are. So you might not want to use the microphones that are built into the unit. You may want to use them, depending. There are a lot of variables there, Douglas. So you need to choose your microphones appropriately and the recorder. And sometimes the two that come in the same unit might be perfectly usable.
There you go. Jeffrey Powers, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, definitely different microphones testing out. It really depends on what you're going to be doing for your electronic music. I mean, because in the grand scheme of things, when you start putting it into electronic music, or anything for that matter, yeah, you can start putting a lot of filters, a lot of effects onto what you're doing to kind of enhance or whatever. So you're trying to figure out whether you're going to need something with more high end, if you're going to need something that's capturing everything, if you want something with a microphone that's dynamic, you want something that's going to, like I said, capture everything. So I would do a lot of experimentation with whatever sound. So you get one sound, and then you just plug in one microphone, do a little bit of recording, plug in another microphone, do a little bit of recording, record from the Zoom with whatever mic systems they have on there, depending on which Zoom you get, and then just get familiar with all the bells and whistles. But if you're looking for the high end, then yeah, the Zoom's not going to be your choice. But if you're looking for something that just gets you started, then Zoom's going to be perfect.
Next question.
Next question comes from Michael Marsh from San Lorenzo, California. 2 mini DV decks behaving badly, DSR 45 and DSR 2000. Halting playback at misframed picture. I've tried many tapes with same results. Troubleshooting help, please.
Ooh, Ronnie Hofsoy is going to start us off here. Ronnie, what do you think?
Yeah, coming from the DV age and the DV cam age, that's kind of thing we try to forget now. I had the same troubles, and of course I just assume that you have done really good cleaning on those and that they are clean and they have clean heads. The other thing to think of is that different type of tapes seem to have different type of kind of lubrication. So using different type of tapes on the same heads and interchange between those, even if these are pro players, I would think that could, I have that result from interchanging between different type of brands of tapes due to that kind of lubrication issue. The other one is that these tapes are getting kind of long in the teeth these days, and it could be that the tapes themselves are kind of getting old. If I would suggest something to test is to make a new recording on those tapes, or have a kind of new tape and do the recording and see if that it's the same problem, just to isolate that the problem is within the players themselves.
Okay, Cochran.
Yeah, those are some really good tips, Ronnie. So back in the day, there was a couple different formats as well. In addition to not mixing tape brands, like there was Panasonic that had a different lubricant, as Ronnie was saying, and those could gum up your heads, and then you play your Sonys, and it could cause those dropouts. But that would just be dropouts. What you're talking about sounds more like it's either DVC Pro, DVC Pro 50. So you could, these different codecs could make the tape move faster. So, for example, HDV, you'd get 42 minutes out of a 60-minute tape. So it's physically running faster through and storing that larger picture. So you want to see, if you're sure you know where that video came from, what camera specifically, then you could determine if you have the right deck. Because I'm betting that you have a misformat there. I'm betting that's what it is. Because unless those tapes were just improperly stored, it sounds like it's a different format. So I would ask that question: is who shot it and what camera did they use? And is that deck the one that's the appropriate player for that format?
Could be all of those things. I'm going to say warning, danger. These are old formats. These are old tapes. They are going to start shedding binder and shedding the actual recording medium. If you possibly can, I'd get things off of that as quick as you can and try to play them as little as possible between now and when you get that content off there if you can. The other thing that used to happen, most of these have a capstan and a pinch roller. The pinch rollers notoriously dry out over time, and that can cause instabilities in how quickly the tape goes through. There's just a lot of things going on. I agree. If you want to try things, get in there and clean them up really, really well, and then play anything as little as possible, because those helical scan heads going across that tape can literally score off the medium and ruin them forever. So if it's really important stuff, it's time to seriously consider getting professional roll-offs done of them and just getting them onto something that's more stable. Let's go to the next question.
Next one's from Nigel Dessau from Austin. It seems like CapCut has joined Resolve in the free video editing world. I have been playing with it, basic AI video building, and while simplistic, it may be an interesting way to start short. Has anyone else used this yet?
Nigel, start us off.
Yeah, I was watching something yesterday, some on YouTube, and they talked about, time to dump Final Cut Pro and go to something that's free. And I'd never heard of CapCut before. So I found it. This is what it looks like. It's, a very typical type linear editing. What was interesting is you can create little AI movies. So I put an AI, what did I want it to be? I said office hours. And it produced me like a couple of minute video. Yes, it's all, stills, and it's all preset audio and video, but it's a great little way to jump. By the way, it talks about Alex in glowing terms. So it has enough of an AI into it. I just wondered whether we'd discussed it before, whether other people played with it, and what thoughts were.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, we've talked about the app before. We haven't talked about the desktop as far as I know. But CapCut is actually owned by ByteDance, of course, TikTok. So there's a lot of people that won't use it because they are afraid of their data getting into the wrong hands in a different country. But the other thing that CapCut does is they do watermark their free versions. Then you get the paid versions to get those watermarks off. Although I know in the iOS version that the easy way to do this is just to basically render the file, then put it into another thing like iMovie, and then cut off the end of it, which is where usually the CapCut logo shows up.
Alex?
Yeah, it's really taken over for a lot of creators. So a lot of them are using CapCut because it's very efficient. It's very good at producing really good videos for TikTok and other social networks. The thing that's kept it off my phone is exactly what Jeffrey talked about. The EULA, if you read into it, is intense. It is the most aggressive release that I've ever seen. And so a lot of us just get very concerned about, I haven't put it on any of my machines because of that. And I'm not usually that, I'm not usually that worried about that kind of thing. But when I read it, I was like, it's asking for access to all your photos. And, this is to a Chinese company. It almost had, I actually stopped using TikTok for a while because I felt like it was, this is where they're going. And so I'm a little bit more hesitant about CapCut because of that. But I will say that in the influencer world, we really saw them move from Insight and Final Cut and iMovie and a couple others to CapCut, and many use CapCut for this, and they're not as worried as I am about it. And maybe I'll get over that or just use an old phone, but or a computer that's not connected to anything else that I'm doing. But that's the concern that I have is what they're asking for.
Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, that EULA stuff is really interesting. I think if people had to have the EULA conversation face-to-face with somebody, a lot of our behavior would change. I mean, Alex, what if I said, yeah, Alex, I would love to edit a video for you, but you're going to have to give me your phone and just let me dig around in it and read all your contacts and
I will
browse
say that,
your... if we had to have that face-to-face conversation, we would never do it.
Yeah,
nobody reads that stuff.
I think that most EULAs they look way worse than they actually are. It's like, we can use your stuff everywhere. Well, that's so they can promote it, and that's so they can, copy it to another page on the website. But some of that stuff, when you see it on EULAs, when you read them, as someone who works on the back end of those things, I understand why they're asking for that. It's just so that they know that they can repost your post or do something else. There's some mechanical things that sound worse than they are. The general consensus is that the CapCut one appears to be worse than it sounds. So it is. So that's the concern that a lot of people have around CapCut, and I'm not the only one. And again, it's a lot of these social networks have those things, and a lot of them are just mechanical so they can get their job done. The CapCut one felt really much deeper than that, and so that's what a lot of us have kind of pulled back on that a little bit. But again, I will say it's the most effective short creation tool in the world. I'm not going to argue with the quality of the app. It's just the concern of what it's asking for in return.
And for those of you who might not be familiar with the term EULA, it's the End User License Agreement, and it's the legally binding language that determines what you can do with that software. So it's something worth understanding. Let's go to the next question.
Next is from Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Adobe's upcoming Project Music GenAI Control tool continues to develop. Do copyright laws protect music from being used to train machine language?
Jeffrey Powers, start us off.
Not at this time, because there's so much gray area to this. Now, if you read this article, they said that that Adobe's basically taking everything from the public domain. If music is in the public domain, then there's no rights to it, no real rights to it, unless you take the audio from, let's say the Boston Symphony did a recording last month of William Tell Overture, and you used that, then there'd be some copyright involved in it. But if you're just taking the music and then you're creating something from that, then you go from there. The big thing is when you get into samples, and of course when you are doing something, you can create music that's very similar to other stuff, and then you have copyright issues possibly come into play. There's an actual database that when somebody writes a song and produces a song, they match it to that database to make sure that it's not going to sound very close, like Hotel California type close, and not have the legal issue that's involved with that.
Alex?
The interesting thing it's interacting is that the public domain, what's in the public domain is now starting to creep forward. We've seen this now because of the copyright laws being, so we've seen Mickey Mouse come in, but all that music through the 30s every year is going to become more and more available. So what's available to the samples is going to be also very different. I think that one of the big advantages of generative AI when it comes to music and other things is that the chances of it creating something that's identical or even close enough for the machine, the Google Eye or whatever eye is looking at this, the chances of them matching those up are very low because it's derivative and it's not looking at it. So it's actually better than if you're using needle drops or other samples because it's much less likely that it's going to be exactly the same as the other ones that are there. So it's, it has that advantage. And of course, we think a lot of us have thought that music is going to be something that after images, music would be easier to do than video. So we're already seeing video. Most of the music that we've seen so far has not been great. So it's been a little synthy and everything else, but we totally expect this to, kind of build up. The other thing that's going to be interesting is to see AI controlling MIDI, which we haven't seen a lot of yet. But if you take all the MIDI instruments that are available and then you give the AI the ability to compose with that, you could end up with something that's far more realistic.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I've been dealing with this for a long time in my video creation career. One of the things, and I'm going to be real delicate about this, but I've had in the past songs that I loved destroyed by somebody using them to synchronize them with stuff that I didn't want them synchronized with. And I don't think anybody wants them synchronized with. And to me, that's the thing. The power of the music is the emotional attachment people have to it. When you change it enough, you lose that emotional attachment. So the thing that some producers are looking for, which is to get the positive benefit of this very popular song attached to my project that makes people feel happy because the music was happy and they have fond memories of it, in order to change it enough so that you're not in violation, you lose all of that. You're no longer getting the emotional benefit of its milieu out in the public's mind. And to me, that makes it more appropriate as we get more generative music. You're going to be able to get things more easily done, but you're going to lose that connection. So you have to build that emotional connection another way. I just think it's a fascinating thing, and we're going to see how it develops over the course of time. I'm still on the fence about whether it'll be a net positive or a net negative. We'll see over the course of time. Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas wants to know, how do you back up an M1 Mini, a Mac M1 Mini or Windows 11 computer to a Synology NAS and restore it back to another PC?
Nigel's going to start us off here. Nigel?
Okay, the trick is not backing up. The trick is always how do you recover? And that's really the hardest part of this process. Okay, so I'll tell you what I do, Paul. I can't help you with Windows. I haven't knowingly used a Windows machine in a few years. But I can tell you what I do with my M1 Mac Mini. I really have 2 or 3 different things. I use Time Machine. It's automatically backed up across to my Synology. Works great. When I invariably delete something I didn't mean to, I can get it. But I do 2 other things. I actively, on my Synology, have a drive where I physically copy things I never want to lose. And then I back that up somewhere else. The third thing I do is, as much as I can, I use Apple's, disk in the cloud. I use Microsoft's OneDrive. I try and use third-party or cloud-based solutions to make sure as much as I can, my documents and my key things are backed up somewhere else automatically. So when I have a failure, if I can't recover from the system that I've done on Time Machine, I can rebuild based on either the fact that Apple will allow me to download the apps again, or it's living either in iCloud or on a Microsoft network.
Ronnie Hofsoy. Ronnie.
Yeah, totally agree with Nigel on that one. We also use Time Machines, but in the later years, I've stopped doing complete backups. If I needed to move something from a drive to another drive, I'll probably use tools like Carbon Copy or similar, which is part of our tool sets. But we tend to think that we have to do a full backup of a machine like we did in the 80s and 90s and maybe later on. But these later years, I've stopped doing full backups only for what we call ghosting back in the days, to duplicate a lot of machines. That would probably be one scenario where I did it. And just to answer the question a little bit more directly, Synology has a lot of tools, and some of them are backup systems to do just this. So just have a look in the app section of the Synology, and you will find the solution for backing up your machine. But as Nigel said, keep a backup of everything that is important, like images, sound files, movies, etc., and do a backup of that one at least 1 or 2 times more. Even if you have it in the cloud, make several other backups, and also make sure that one of these backups are offsite on a disk. Maybe store it in a friend's house or something like that.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, and on the Windows end of things, Windows does have a backup tool for your machine, but it really depends, as Ronnie said, really depends on if you're backing up that machine to restore it to that machine, or you're creating what's called an image so you can restore it to another machine. It's really funny because I was on Twitter X the other day, and actually somebody posted the old ghost screen for doing images, and that just brought back memories. But there's many third-party third-party programs. And of course, you also have to think if you're doing Macs and PCs at the same time, you want to back it up. I would back it up to an image so I could put it onto the same drive into the same folders or similar folders. But if you want to back up Mac with the Mac partition, you want to back up Windows with the Windows partition, then that's another consideration that you have to make if you're doing both environments.
Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. What makers of studio furniture do you prefer? I'm looking for a desk that can handle a 61 or a 76 note keyboard.
Alex.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of curious what type of production. If you're talking about music production, there's, of course, keyboard stands that you may want to be looking at. When you're talking about production desks, most of the desks that I've bought in the last 10 years have been from Cabinet Works in Ohio. They build studio desks, and they're great, but these are ones with turrets and ready to go. So if you're just looking for a keyboard, someone else might be able to give you a better recommendation. But if you're looking for a production desk, probably in the country, that's probably my favorite.
Ronnie Hofsaway.
Yeah, and if you're based in Europe, the German company called Thomann has a lot of furnitures that you could have a browse through, but I know Douglas is from the US, so for all the other ones, have a look at Thomann. They have a big selection.
And I'm going to add in the name Middle Atlantic. They have off-the-shelf stuff. I saw them for decades at NAB and other places. They make serious furniture. I'm sitting at a Middle Atlantic desk that I think I've had in use for close to 25 years now without any major problems. The nice thing about dedicated stuff, whatever you buy, is that they will have thought out things like cable troughs and monitor wings that are adjustable for your near fields and things like that. So they've put a lot of time into refining the designs. There are plenty of companies who do these kind of desks. So look out there and good luck, Douglas. Hope we can find exactly what you want. Let's go to the next question.
Next, we have a QR code question from Steve Ura from Madison, Wisconsin. Zoom on iOS always requires a separate action to join audio. It can't even be included in a shortcut. What is the logic behind adding steps? Is Zoom commonly used without audio?
Alex, what do you think?
You can join Zoom with audio, and you can have it automatically turn on by simply changing your settings. So if you go into in Zoom on your phone, you'll see this more. And if you click on that, you're going to see this here. And what you want to do is go into meetings. And so if you go into meetings here, you're going to see auto connect audio at the top here. And if I click on that, you'll see that I can choose that. Now you'll notice that I have chosen off because I would never want, never would want I want to join a Zoom meeting automatically when I come out of it. Especially if I'm in a car or something else, I want to choose to do that, because it's really annoying when people show up and suddenly they bring a bunch of audio with them. So I'm showing you how to do it. And at the same time, I will highly recommend, for the sake of everybody else in every meeting that you jump into, don't use that. So really turn it on. I have my audio and video off by default when I join every meeting, because I want to control what that looks like. I don't want it to just jump in and suddenly be there. So I would recommend against it, but that's how you do it.
Marty Adius.
Well, there are actually two settings. There's automatically join with computer audio, and then there is join with audio on or off. So muted or unmuted.
Just don't want anything on. like turn it all on manually. Like it's really in addition to being dangerous to you, it is super annoying when people come in and they come in mid-sentence, they come in with noise, they come in without settling down. So as a person on the other side that deals with people who come in on automatically all the time, I highly recommend against it, because you're just like what's going. They'll smile. This is kind of an emperor new clothes conversation. They'll smile, but what's going on in their head is, come on. So anyway, so just know that that's the case. Doing it manually is worth it.
Next question.
Jake Perrin from Rockford, Michigan. We have 3 campuses we are trying to connect together for a large event. The connection at one of them is weak. It's using Starlink, which isn't super reliable. What would you recommend for comms to stay connected and on schedule between the campuses?
Let's start with Guy Cochran. Guy, what do you think?
So call our friend Tucker. He has been a member of the community for a long time, and he started a company called Basecamp Global, and we use his comm solution all the time. So it's a Unity comm solution, and they host it in the cloud. And he'll set up all your users and give them all the passwords and instruct them how. And he's magically available there to help you if you have any issues. It's a wonderful service, and it's solid. We use it all the time. So I would recommend giving Basecamp Global a call.
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Yeah, first of all, you should never trust Starlink for those types of real-time connections. It could work, but it wouldn't probably. Another thing, if you are in sight between these campuses and you would like to also have them connected network-wise, so you could use some Ubiquiti links. And they have these bridges that bridges together two sites, which we've done several times. It's really high speed and pretty stable, and the latency is really low if that is a thing. And on these links, you can have everything from video going, multi-views, etc., not just comms.
Alex.
Second on Tucker. So Tucker is going to be able to take care of you in a great way as far as getting things set up. You don't have to worry about any of it. It's just going to work. So he's really, really worth reaching out to. We are tracking the new software that we're tracking right now is also ClearComm now has their new cloud software that is related to cloud. ClearComm in the cloud. I think this is potentially an update from, and we're going to be tracking it closely and possibly using it in the future. So that's another thing to look at. If you need hardware integration, so Unity is great when you're doing all iOS or Android integration or computer integration. But if you start needing to use hardware, you may want to look at something like some of the ClearComm solutions where they're going to be able to drop boxes down that are real comms, solutions for you to use. And also another one to look at is Telos. And we're going to try to bring them on as well to take a look at what they're doing. But they're kind of a mixture of those things as well.
Ronnie, you want to get back in?
Yeah, it seems like the question is more about reliable IT infrastructure, not as much to comms, but I might be mistaken.
Well, the last thing it said, what would you recommend for comms? So I think we're all listing off of like how would we handle comms, and so I will say that I agree with Ronnie that satellite using Starlink for comms would be you're going to probably have chunks where suddenly no one's available, and the rule of production is it'll most likely happen when you need to do a queue. So I think that Murphy's Law would say that the queue will happen right when you lose contact with Starlink. Cellular works just fine as long as you turn your buffer up a little bit. So if you turn the buffer up to like 200 milliseconds, we find that cellular works great. It actually works better than Wi-Fi. So one of the first things we do if we're having trouble in Unity with Wi-Fi, or trouble with Wi-Fi, we drop to cellular pretty quickly, and we find that the signal's a lot more stable.
Also, I wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow we're going to have an exciting show for you. Nathan Schlegel, who is a design and production director, and he's going to set the stage he has, over the course of his career, set the stage for top musicians, Fortune 100 companies, even popes and presidents. So we're really looking forward to the show tomorrow. If you're interested in music production, and anything at that high level, make sure you're here tomorrow. And don't forget, this show is run by your questions and your votes on them. So you can put your questions into Mukana, which is our kind of more formal system, and vote them up and down. And you can also use the QR code that shows up occasionally during the show. When the QR code appears on the screen, at that point, you can just shoot that with your phone or whatever. Those go into the queue, and we get to them over the course of the show. So that's the way you can interact and really drive the show. Let's go on to the next question.
Next is Zach Jeffers. For remote talking head contributors, would you rather deal with Zoom or a dedicated video encoder? Putting together a Mac Mini traveling studio kit, and could go either way.
Let's go to Jeffrey Powers.
I would actually do both. Simply put, like for instance, if you do something like a Video Ninja, that's free, so you can put that right onto the system. So I'd have anything that can do it for free would be on there. I'd have, as long as it's not bloatwaring your system. If you've got something, of course, bringing in Zoom, that's the most reliable, the easiest, and so many different types of instructions on how to fix things if there are problems. I'm guessing that these these are regular contributors, that not first-time contributors. If they are first-time contributors, then it's easier to get information for Zoom than it is to go in and learn a brand new program that would do that. But once again, if you've got seasoned people, you do one, and if it fails, you can do the other. So I'd have both of them on the system, hands down.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing. If they're just regular contributors, Zoom with a 1080p account specifically seems to be the cleanest and easiest, especially if they're like a congressperson or something like that just says, I do this all the time. Zoom just makes it super simple for them. If you want a prettier picture, though, 1080 looks great. You're seeing it with us right now. If they're well lit. But if you have full control, there's some companies that have made these kits that'll VPN in. Panasonic just did I'll put a link in the chat with the BG-H1 and BS-1H with these VPN kits where basically you open up the lid and there's a computer in there and they can VPN into it. And Tucker and the Basecamp Global guys do the same thing with Insta360 links. So those guys do kits, but you can also, if it's a regular venue, you can do an Epiphan Pearl Nano, which is another way that we do this, but you're going to have SRT delay of about 2 seconds. From the cloud, though, you have full control over that unit. You could switch audio levels, XLR to mini plug to SDI to control the data rate. So there's lots of variables there. So it just depends on how much control you have over that contributor and how easy you want to make it for them. And if the prettier picture is worth all the extra cost.
Chris Fenwick.
I wonder if there's the possibility of a day where camera manufacturers put Zoom into their camera.
Ooh, that would be interesting. I have to think about that. Let's move on to the next question.
Next is a QR code question from Max Schiffman in Carlsbad, California. Doing a group lunch breakout in a ballroom with no available air walls. Any solutions other than a pipe and drape so that I can divide the room into 6 areas with minimal sound bleed?
Ooh, minimum sound bleed is going to be a problem. Marty, what do you think?
My sincere condolences, Max. This is just a product of poor event planning. It's, I don't know, how many people are involved? How many people are going to be in each group? What are the acoustics of the room like? So the first thing I would think of is to set up, we're talking about loudspeakers, right? And trying to isolate 6 different areas in a large room. I would set up my loudspeakers centrally located in the room, pointing outward in 6 different directions. And I would set them high on the stands and pointed down at the audience so as to try to minimize reflections off the walls, right? That's about as best as you can do, even with pipe and drape, because drape is not soundproofing. It will dampen sound a little bit, but even with air walls, I've heard lots of bleed from room to room. So keep your volume low and your audiences tightly packed in each section, and just try and localize the sound as much as possible.
Alex.
Yeah, so we've done a couple things here we've had this problem before. And so one of the things that we've done is we build hallways between the 6. So if you think about, if you have 6 here like this, we actually turn these into hallways here on either side. So you put a couple feet between them. So that, and then what we do is we do pipe and drape on all the way around like this. So what you're doing is you're creating a buffer. So the sound is going to get knocked down by one set of pipe and drape, and then it's going to hit the next one, and then it goes into the room. It also separates folks out. So just what you don't want to do is have a single thing of pipe and drape between everybody. But this also allows people to get to where they need to go. You do give up a little bit of space, but you would find that typically, if you're only giving up 2 feet around, you can afford to do that, but you have to decide whether you have enough room to do that. I do agree with Marty that having them up a little bit higher and then pointed down is a good idea, because you're not going to have to turn those speakers up. If they're higher than someone's head, their bodies aren't going to absorb it, which means you can run it lower to make that note. Note that bass is going to carry a lot further. The long wavelengths are going to carry a lot further. So if you do a higher roll-off, you're going to find that it just doesn't carry very far, especially if you use pipe and drape. The pipe and drape that you want to use is thick pipe and drape, and you can order these. You want thick velour pipe and drape or a thicker pipe and bow. You don't want something that's visual only. You want something that's got weight to it, and you want it to be exceptionally high. So you're asking for, and you can find this. It depends on what city you're in. You're looking for 20 feet. It's a 20-foot pipe and drape instead or right to the ceiling, whatever that ceiling is. But otherwise, you want to go 20 feet up, 16 minimum. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to have a lot of that. A lot of that's going to get picked up. It's not going to all get picked up. You're in an imperfect situation. The next thing you want to do is when you're asking for it, when you give them the dimensions for the pipe and drape, you want 100% fullness. So 100% fullness means you have twice as much drape as the amount of distance you're covering. So it's going to be very, very, you're going to have a lot of waves into that. So if you have two layers of 100% fullness that are 20 feet high, up to 20 feet high, that have 3 feet between them, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be significantly better than many of the other options.
Let's go to Jeffrey Powers.
So they do this in places like Vegas all the time. In fact, I have a regular yearly event that I go to, in where our stage, it's basically you have right here, our stage goes this way, their stage goes that way. It of course, as they said, putting the speakers up high and pointing them down, low volume, that works. Another thing that you can do is you can put the speakers right next to the chairs and keep it at a low volume. Some people have speaker systems that put the speakers behind the person's heads, so the speakers are aligned all around the chairs. So if you're outside of that zone, you really can't hear anything. And then, of course, if you're angling it, the stage is that way. One sound goes this way, one sound goes this way. You have the pipe and drape in the middle. That way, they're not seeing each other. And then all you have to worry about is how boisterous the person's speaking ability is.
Let's go, I believe, to the next question.
Another QR question from Dewey Evans in Austin, Texas. And he wants to know any feedback on mixing Blackmagic Design Studio 6K Pro and URSA Broadcast G2 cameras in outdoor live studio using just shading controls in an atem software.
Ronnie Hopsoy, do you have experience with this, and can you help him out?
Yeah, the shading options is, you can make these cameras pretty similar. Of course, if this is just to compare those cameras and what you can do, they have a slightly different chip inside them, so the color science is a little bit different. But as far as being able to remote shade them, that's you have good options inside the software. Of course, using a hardware interface is better. Both Blackmagic have these, or you can purchase those, or you can rent them. And also ScoreHoy has some hardware interfaces that are really good to do shading remotely on camera. So highly recommended.
Alex.
Color science is not the same between the cameras, so you're really going to need a good color chart to make that happen. So you can use something like some kind of X-rite. This is a very small one. I wouldn't use this one for what you're doing. But something like this that you can at least do an auto check. So you're looking for an X-rite or other. I use a chromadumonde chart from DSC Labs, but you could use something that comes from X-rite that is look and resolve and make sure that you can find those, and you can build LUTs for those cameras so they all match together. Remember, when you do that, you have to use the lenses that you're going to use, because the lenses add to the color or subtract from the color. So you're going to need to make sure that you are adjusting those cameras there. Now, you can do that live. Again, what you're going to look for is you want a controlled space. Whatever your lighting is set, your lighting is going to be the sun. so you're going to have, but you can you don't need to necessarily match the cameras under the sun. You can just get them into what you're looking for are two light sources. Typically, we use Divas for these, and you have two light sources. The camera is typically about 5 to 8 feet away from your chart. You're going to light it evenly, and you're going to get all of those cameras to line up to each other before you go outside. Don't try to color correct them when you're outside. You may do some fine tuning for that, but get them all to where you think that they're all the same under 56K. Before you get there, and you can do this, you don't need to do it on site if you have the cameras in the lab. So get them all working together. This is what happens when you see those big football games and everything else. There's an engineer who sits there with each camera, lining them up with typically a DSC Labs chromadumonde chart, and they look at vector scopes and they get everything to look exactly the same as they work through so that all those cameras match. And even then they have trouble. So, but otherwise, being able to shade them, you need, as long as you have the bidirectional controls, if you're using SDI, an SDI switcher, as long as you have bidirectional converters, you should be fine.
I'll just note one more thing. Occasionally, venues will have a stage that has a roof over it. And in those kind of circumstances where they're casting shadow across the whole stage, they'll use active lighting inside of there. So maybe it won't be totally exposed to the sun. And in those cases, you can have some moderate amount of control over lighting inside. Although, of course, if you've got an open area toward the audience, that's all going to be daylight 5600K or above. So you're going to want a light with that in mind. But that's another common option out there. Let's go to the next question.
Next is from Guy Cochran in Seattle in the US. Can you run Final Cut in the cloud?
I believe we have seen it. Guy Cochran is going to answer this question.
The ball is coming. He's running, and
he catches
he goes over to the other screen and he shows Mac Stadium. So right before the show, I was having an issue where I couldn't get, this is Mac Stadium and Mac Mini running in the cloud, and I couldn't get in here into the App Store to download Final Cut. So I hit up support, and with really quickly, they got back to me and told me how to do it. You just had to reset a password inside of the users and groups, and I did that. And now Final Cut's running in the cloud. So I mean, this is some Zoom footage that I shot, a quick little interview here for a friend, and it's working. So it's pretty amazing that you can, have an interview done in Zoom, send it up to the cloud, give somebody else the login, let them cut it up and spit it back out, and you didn't have to download anything to your connection. So for those of us that might be on Starlink in the middle of nowhere, and remember, you're just controlling pixels here. So if you don't want to download those big 2 gig files over Starlink in the middle of nowhere, but you still want to get some stuff done or get an editor going with a rough cut, this is a wonderful solution. So I would look at Mac Stadium, and I'm not a shill for them. I love this service. I just got it for myself to test Mimo Live, and I'm really impressed with their not only the speed of the machines, but also their service and being able to get back to me quick. So something to think about.
Josh Kaufman.
Yeah, interesting guy. What's the I/O like in and out of Mac Stadium? Does it give you access to ports? Do you what remote access are you using? Do they give you a lot of control there?
They do. So you have to reach out to them, but basically you have a static IP. It's yours, and you can. They show you how to do VPNs. So it's meant to be robust. The thing that I want to do next is hook 2 together, so I can have one machine that's bringing in footage. I want to try Stream Voodoo and some of these other services to just see how well that we can get feeds remotely into Mimo Live, and see if I can get NDI working in their cloud, because we know how to do it really well in AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. So this is like the next place to go, especially because it's just one fee. So, I mean, if I run the same machine inside of AWS, it's going to cost me about $750 a month. So way more money, not as fast of a machine, and I have to pay for egress. So here it's all you can eat in and out, and the connection's 10 gigabit. So faster than your home, 10 times faster than your home network. So if you have footage from a client that's putting it in Frame.io, you could connect your Frame.io or your Dropbox or your Google Cloud, and the footage will just come over super fast. Like it'll blow your mind how fast stuff comes over. I mean, think about that, 10 times faster than your local network over the internet. So you have somebody shooting on a Blackmagic RAW out in the field, they hit their hotel, they upload the footage, or Blackmagic Cloud, you can suck over the RAW files, or you can just get the proxies and get to work. So cool solutions.
You're seeing why we're all excited about the changes in the industry. Things are moving really fast. Once again, let's go to the next question.
Zach Jeffers is back from the Great Pacific Northwest. Preferred remote management app system for production systems in the field and the cloud, for example, Windows and Mac, maybe Linux. What is your go-to provides you the it just works reliability?
Alex, what's your opinion?
It depends. So Guy could probably tell you more about how he's using it there. I will say that I don't know why
Alex, I think you're sending us a black screen.
I think
something's gone.
I'll let Guy finish this.
Yeah, it just depends on how your workflow goes. Magewell has a really cool cloud service where you can administer all your devices. So if you have a bunch of SRT encoders, same with Epiphan, it's really pretty looking. So you can get some knockoff stuff. Like I have some stuff from the off-brand Chinese companies, and it's really hard to go in there and figure out what's what and manage these things from afar. So it just makes you super nervous when, it's time to air and you've got seconds to make something work and it doesn't work predictably. So we like vMix in the cloud as well. I mean, just being able to take SRT feeds and feed them in. Zoom with Zoom Rooms is also really nice. I know that if Jeff Keithley was here, he would say Sienna processing engine, but that's like $15,000. So, but yeah, as far as stuff just working, get another vouch for Tucker and Jonas. So you could spend a lot of time. We spent years figuring this stuff out. And so we could spin up stuff in 18 minutes and that would take somebody else a long time to figure out. So sometimes it's worth paying somebody else just to get all this stuff working for you and then just hand you the keys. So what we do now is when I say hand you the keys, we could literally give you a Stream Deck and a Behringer X-Touch and have you, so an X-Touch is, if you haven't seen one before, it's a control surface. And this is crazy, but I was working on a production where in Germany, they're moving the faders, and it's moving the faders in Australia and North Carolina with one move. So I just bought one yesterday, and I started doing it the same thing. So the way that they do that, it was central control, and then so it's an AWS vMix instance, but we're all VPN'd in, and now we have control over these things. So again, getting somebody else to set it up. I know there's some third parties out there that do live control, and some of these guys that'll do it all for you at a really, really expensive cost. But you can get somebody to help you out and do it for pretty cheap. I mean, a vMix instance is $2 an hour once you get it working. So once the infrastructure is built, it's pretty easy to run.
Nice. And Alex, I see you're back. Are you back live?
Yeah, what Guy said.
Okay.
I didn't see any reason to. I raised my hand because no one had raised their hand, and I was gonna figure it out. Then Guy raised his hand, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just.
I was so interested in what you were saying, and all of a sudden,
if you're wondering what happened, my Sony camera just turns off every once in a while, and it's not overheated.
Oh.
It just goes. I'm gonna turn off. So I have to get into. I've been getting into the habit of turning it off and on before the show, so that it's there. But it's a. No one can build a perfect webcam. That's all I'm saying. Is you figure out which
How many cameras have you tried to use for this show on the air? 30, 40, 50?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it is. It's kind of like Sony has is good color science, and they've got this autofocus that I really like because it's just easier. It's a little less stressful for me. But I will say that the power management and heat management on the small Sony cameras is kind of a dumpster fire. So it's, I don't understand how it got out of they get out of the factory on the smaller ones. But you feel like, I don't quite understand that part, but I'm still figuring out how to do it. And it worked for a long time. And then it has suddenly started to do this thing where it goes, I'm going to turn off for no apparent reason. Like it's not particularly hot. It's not, if I turn it off and on, then it'll work for another day. So
you're back and you look and sound great. So.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Let's go to the next question.
Next is Douglas Carmichael. 70% of game sales in Japan were on physical media instead of digital. Why would Japanese market hang on to it in the download stream first era?
Let's start with Nigel. What are your thoughts, Nigel?
I think there are lots of reasons you might be downloading for a particular console or device that requires the physical media. You may be a collector of these things. If you bought the Final Fantasy one, you might want the disc for Final Fantasy 73 or wherever they are, because you collect those things. And sometimes people have, emotional connections. I've just been sorting out some stuff in my office, and I found the original Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game, including the peril-sensitive sunglasses and the pocket fluff. I don't have a computer that can run that, but I'm holding on to that for an emotional reason. I'd say Dave Troutman also pointed out in a message, Japan is still quite formal about certain things. Until recently, if you wanted to submit documents and tag stuff, you had to do it on physical media. So sometimes, despite them having a lot less room typically to live in, people will give priority to things that give them comfort. And sometimes that's the physical media.
There you go. Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, that and the fact that, even though Japan still, I think it's about 95% for high speed internet access. There's still a lot of places that they don't want to go online. They want to be able to get into their system, get in their games, and go from there. And then, of course, we have the underground illegal activities that happen with gaming as well, trying to build up these gaming cafes and things like that that they're trying to make enough to make a living wage off of it, and it's not always the best ways to do it. But we won't get into that whole point. But the whole thing is that I know that there's some things that I love my physical media. We were talking about Ultima 2 yesterday, and I wish I still had the original media for the games of Ultima 2 and Ultima 3 that I played back in the 90s or 80s.
Alex?
I think that they do that because they have Akihabara. Like it is you have to understand, like having that the availability of something that you can get to from anywhere, buy and sell your discs, relatively easily. I think that what I think you get a little bit of I think they like to buy them, use them, sell them, and they can't do that in today's world. In today's world, you subscribe to it, and you pay for it. You don't really own it. You're paying some kind of subscription, and I think that what they're pushing back on is they like to play a lot of games. They like to play a lot of different games, and Akihabara is if they didn't have Akihabara, they'd probably move to subscription. But because that space is so available and so easy to get to, I think that there's and the market there is so easy for them to buy and sell games. They're actually paying much less than we are for the games because the resale value is, especially once they buy a used one, is so close to the purchase that they can play it for a long time for a fraction of what we're paying it for. So I think that they're kind of and I will say that from a technology perspective, the cities are very high tech. It's amazing how quickly it falls off. Like you go 20 minutes out of Tokyo and things get real analog real fast. It's kind of an amazing thing to watch.
Let's go to the next question.
Next is our friend Greg Gibson from DC. What is your favorite teleprompter software, particularly in a situation where a third party is advancing the prompter for talent? Also, best prompter for self-contained use.
Let's start with Nigel Dessau. Nigel?
So I'm going to answer the second question. You need Courtney or someone who understands the other side of the cloud-based ones better than me. But for the personal one, when I need one at home or in my home office, I'm using Virtual Teleprompter Pro. I find that pretty easy to use. I like the fact that it's transparent. I can throw it up on my system pretty quickly. Find it easy to use, easy to manage, and I've suggested it to other people who are not as technical, and they've not struggled with it.
Jeffrey Powers.
On the PC side, I use Teleprompter Pro. That's found in the Windows Store. On Mac, I use I think it's just Teleprompter, but it's more about another program that I use for the self-contained, and that is a program called Better Display. Because the best part about that is I can when I had my old studio, I had a camera in front of a TV, and I'd have the teleprompter software, and then I'd use Better Display to mirror that TV, create what's called a picture-in-picture, flip that, which I would then bring into my teleprompter, which was another monitor that was sitting on the teleprompter, iPad-style teleprompter. And that way I'd have control of two teleprompters, so I could have camera one here, I could be talking and easily move to camera two here, switch it up, and then continue to talk from there. So that might be if you're going to do multi-camera systems, that might be something to think about. Alex?
Yeah, for most of the time I use Teleprompter Plus when I do it myself. So if I'm trying to I need to do a script and I need it to be all self-contained, I don't use that very often. I'd rather just say something naturally and then cut it up. But if I'm doing something where I actually absolutely need to do a teleprompt, I use a program called Teleprompt Smart or Prompt Smart. This listens to your voice and keeps moving forward. So it has patented voice track technology, and I use this. I bought it a couple of years ago because I needed to do some prompting, and so this will actually just listen to you talk, and it will just keep on progressing. So you can sit there and talk. You do have to get used to it. It's not as good as a real prompt operator, but it's for me. it was easier to use that than for me to try to move it up myself while I was talking. So instead of having to think about my hand moving and controlling it in some way, whether, and I've had lots of controllers for those, it was easier for me to just have something that's listening to me. But what it does is it kind of moves a little bit in chunks and not as smoothly. But once you get used to that cadence, I find it easier to have it just follow along as I'm reading it.
Chris Fenwick.
Yeah, Greg, I would recommend really pushing your people to just use a prompter operator. I'm interested in the one that Alex just mentioned, the Prompt Smart. But, an interesting guy, Jonas and Tucker have been coming up a lot today. I just worked with Jonas and Tucker the last couple of days. It was fantastic. Those guys are awesome. But the number one problem that we had with our show, the number one prompter, spoiler alert, the number one problem was the prompter, because at the last minute, the host of the show said, "Oh, I just need to run my prompter." And it was a nightmare. It was like we should have put our foot down and said, "No, we'll take that over. We'll feed the prompter to you in a window. We'll pin it, whatever." And it's so easy to have a remote prompter operator running their output through OBS, pretending it into a camera and spit it out to the Zoom. If I hadn't been directing, I would have just offered to do it myself. But the nice thing about having it in the system, as opposed to like some self-run thing at a remote site, is once it's in the system, everybody on the show is on board. Everybody can follow along. Everybody can see how much more there is to go. It's just so much better when it's a feed in your show. Everybody just follows the same person.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question, Eric Hertz from Hanford, Connecticut. What latency can we tolerate in a Zoom meeting where audio is ahead of the video, which is being re-encoded into a super source?
Alex.
People get put up with a lot with Zoom. I think we've gotten used to, when we did production, a lot of times we would say you don't want to be more than 60 milliseconds off. People will start to notice it after 60 milliseconds. But I will say with Zoom, I think that a lot of times people are regularly seeing much longer latencies. So it's not uncommon for them to see a 200 millisecond latency or or more and be used to it. But of course, we're always trying to reduce that down to as close to zero as we can.
Let's get to the next question.
Tim Snyder from Louisville, Kentucky is back, and he's going back to the shading question. We are planning to go to visit our venues and capture chromadumonde frames under the lights at the venue. Alex, are you saying that we can do this in our studio under 5600K lights?
And Alex.
Yeah, so it doesn't really help you to take photos of chromadumonde charts under the lights that you have there, because it's designed to capture, you have to capture the entire thing of each camera, the entire setup of each camera all the way through, including the lens in the environment, if you're trying to capture that there. So it's not going to help you to take pictures there. What you need to do is you just need to get all the cameras to be the same. And what you can do then is, as long as they're the same, that's the most important part of shading the cameras, is that they remain similar to each other. And if you know that you're in a 56K environment, you should be able to do that. Now, if you are doing the shading, oftentimes you should be able to, once you've corrected those cameras, even change color space, or not change color space, but change from 32 to 56, and they should stay the same if they're lined up correctly. So you can do that in the lab. Typically, it's done on site, but it can be done in the lab. But the main thing is that it doesn't help you to have images ahead of time. You have to have the cameras exactly how they're going to work through the system with lenses in front of them to properly color correct them to each other.
And we are close to the top of the hour. A couple of quick notes. The Isadora Lab, 1 hour after this. Also today, 2 hours after this, we're doing a Mimo Live Lab with Oliver Breidenbach. So if you're interested in either of those programs, this is your place. Nathan Schlegel is going to be our guest tomorrow. I mentioned him earlier. He's been working with top musicians, Fortune 100 companies, even popes and presidents. And we're going to be talking about the world of elite event production and unforgettable live experiences. So that's a pretty exciting thing that's going to be happening on tomorrow's show. Also, don't forget, as always, what you do in terms of interacting with the show. We try to be as interactive and as live as possible, so your votes always counts. We also have 2 events coming up. We're about to talk about the eclipse, which is a huge deal for us right now after this show. Also, NAB is coming up, so we'll be talking more about that. We'll be right back. We are so excited today. Many of you know, if you've been watching the show and listening, that there is a full eclipse coming up in just under 40 days. April 8th is a big day when a large band of the United States from Mexico to Canada and running in the U.S. from Texas up to Maine will be at or near totality for a rare total solar eclipse. To help you get the maximum enjoyment and accurate science about the event, we're delighted to welcome to the show today eclipse experts Graham Jones, who's an astrophysicist and science communicator, and Anna Buckle, who's the Eclipse live show host and journalist, both of them coming to us from timeanddate.com to answer your questions ahead of our eclipse coverage. To both of you, welcome. Good morning and nice to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We are so excited. You know, we have been talking about this here on the show for a long time. We have so many people who are part of the office hours community who are just fascinated with the science of these kinds of things. And what we're so excited about to have you involved is to give us some really deep opinions and ideas about, why are these important and what happens with these? So, Nathan, do you want to give us or Graham, excuse me, do you want to give us an idea of how you got involved in this whole area of science?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing with solar eclipses is that they really are the most, dramatic event in astronomy. And, they're special for a few reasons. The first reason is that they really are quite rare. They only happen anywhere in the world about once every 18 months. And if we look at any given location on the planet, they only happen about, on average, once every 375 years or so. So, I mean, firstly, these are really rare events. Secondly, they are events that are just involve all of your senses. Astronomy is mostly just looking at the sky and seeing things with your eyes. But with eclipses, the great thing is you can see this happening in the sky, but it really has an impact on your surroundings, on your local environment. The sky goes dark, the light fades, the temperature changes, the humidity changes, nature, animals, people around you, everybody is reacting to this. And, it really, when you see people after their first total solar eclipse, they are spaced out for many days in many cases. So, it is a big deal. And, it's always super exciting.
I remember as a young kid reading in some science fiction things about the projection of back in the early days before this science was settled, people just freaking out. They literally thought that everything was coming to an end. We know so much more about them now. And Anna, can you tell us a little bit about the excitement of this from your point of view?
My first total solar eclipse was with Graham on a live show, and I can attest to all those physical experiences that he's talking about. We were on the rooftop in a small village in Argentina, on the rooftop of the municipality building, couldn't get down. We're there for hours, 30 degrees, sun is blaring down, and as the sun is covered by the moon, the temperature goes down, and it goes down from 30 degrees Celsius. I'm sorry, I don't have that in Fahrenheit, down to 15 degrees Celsius, and it's cold, and we're getting dressed. And during totality, and this was about a minute and 30 seconds of totality. Graham was counting down. He was saying, "Look out for the Bailey bead, look out for these things," and it felt like it was forever, and it felt like it was just going to took a second, and it was birds were flapping about, the dogs were barking, and it was really kind of the Anna before and after experiencing a total eclipse. It's I get shivers even talking about it right now.
Sounds so exciting. I keep seeing the term ring of fire associated with this one that's coming up. Can you explain to our audience kind of what that means and what kinds of different solar eclipses there are?
So ring of fire is actually associated with annular solar eclipses, and that's the eclipse that we had in October. So that was the ring of fire. That's when the moon is smaller than the sun, so you get a ring of fire around the moon's disk, covering only partially the sun. For this eclipse, we don't get a ring of fire. The moon covers the sun completely, and you see a halo. You see the corona, the sun's corona, kind of floating out from it, a very kind of ethereal kind of look. So it's very different from the annular eclipse, and ring of fire is for those eclipses.
I also want to just not miss the fact that for anybody who's going to go outside and just do this, there are safety concerns with this, right? At some point, you are looking at the sun, which can be very dangerous to people. Can somebody talk to what the people should do to make sure that they can enjoy this, appreciate it, but still stay safe?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, this is a super important point that we should just spend some time thinking about today. So yeah, looking at the sun is something we cannot do without proper eye protection. And proper eye protection means something like solar eclipse glasses from a source that you know and from a source that you trust, from a reputable vendor, from a local astronomy club, from a local organization. We are never able to look at any part of the sun with the naked eye at any stage during a partial eclipse. So the moon starts moving across the face of the sun. It starts covering up more and more of the sun. We eventually get to a stage where there is only just a very, very thin crescent of the sun left. We just have, 1% of the sun's disk that is still exposed. But even at that stage of the eclipse, we still need to be wearing proper solar filters for observing the sun, because even though it's just a tiny fraction of the sun's disk we can see, it can still cause irreparable damage to the human eye. So yeah, using proper solar filters is absolutely crucially important. The only time during an eclipse that it's safe to remove filters is during totality. So that's after we've got to this 99% partial eclipse. The moon finally covers up the whole of the sun. That gives us totality. That's when we can see the solar corona that Anna mentioned before. And at this point in the eclipse, when the sun's disk is completely hidden, that's when we can remove solar filters. We can remove eclipse glasses, and then we can, really enjoy looking at this solar corona that's shining around the sun. In fact, we have to take off eclipse glasses in order to be able to see the solar corona. The thing to remember, and just kind of, sticking with the important safety message, is that totality only lasts for a few minutes at most. And it does depend where you are on the eclipse path. It can only last for a few seconds. It can last for a few minutes. But eclipse glasses have to be put back on before the sun reappears on the other side of the moon. And it's very easy to lose track of time during totality because, it's an incredible sight. And, 3 or 4 minutes can fly by in what just seems like a handful of seconds. And it is important to get eclipse glasses, to get filters back in place before the sun reappears on the other side of the moon. So,
do we know for this eclipse how long the totality is expected? If you're right in the center of the band, if you are at full totality, how long can people expect this phenomenon that is safe to look at with the naked eye to last?
So if you're near we have this narrow path of totality, which is crossing Mexico and the United States and Canada, as you said. It's about 120 miles wide. If you are in the middle of that path, you can be expecting around about 4 minutes of totality. As you move towards the edge of the path, then the length of totality drops down to 0 seconds at the edge of the path. It's really good to make sure you know what the timings are for your location. So, there are many ways that you can get the eclipse timings, for where you're going to be. One of the places is to come to timeanddate.com, and for any location, you can get all of the timings for when the eclipse starts and how long it lasts and when it finishes. But yeah, being aware of how long you have to soak in totality is really important, and that can just help you prepare for getting your eclipse glasses safely back on after totality has finished. Yeah.
I know we have a lot of things to talk about. I really want to, the coverage that you're going to do, the coverage we're going to do here at Office Hours, coordinating all that, but we have others on the panel who want to get questions in. So Josh, what are yours?
Anna and Graham, fabulous having you here on Leap Day. Seems oddly appropriate. I just wanted to ask you about your experience with helping amateur astronomers, and what activities are they interested in getting the most out of their observation of the eclipse?
So we've been working with amateur astronomers for 6-7 years now for the eclipses. We also travel out ourselves to live stream eclipses, but also with amateurs. And usually it's about nudging them along to let them give them some technical pointers, and they try things out and they come back and they're wowed and excited and happy, and they come back and come back and come back. We have some people that we've worked with. For example, one person from Perth Observatory in Australia, we've worked with him for 7 years now. He's been coming back streaming eclipses for us so many times. So it's just the excitement. It's providing a platform, and it's sharing the joy of eclipses with the rest of the world that just gets them super excited.
Josh, do you have a follow-up? Or Alex, I think, is up next.
So there's a couple different. It's good to see you guys again. There's a couple different things that you can look at during the eclipse, right? There's as far as looking at the corona. Can you explain a little bit about what are some of the things that present themselves during totality?
Yeah, so totality is one thing, but leading up to totality is also really exciting. So you've got a partial eclipse that grows. So the moon's disk covers the sun more and more and more and more. So you'll feel the temperatures dropping. You can look at the ground. You'll see, look at the shadows through trees, you can see little crescent shapes forming there. So there's a lot of fun things looking kind of leading up to totality itself. But just before totality, and Graham can help me here, you see something called Bailey's beads. Now that's the sun streaming through the valleys, the peaks and valleys on the moon's edge, and it turns into little beads and pearls of light on the side of the moon. And that's something that you'll see right before totality. And then it goes
like a couple seconds before, right? It's just a moment for Bailey's beads.
How many
seconds?
I mean,
we're sort of talking here from around about sort of 15 seconds before totality begins. The first effect we can see is the phenomenon of the diamond ring, which is maybe one of the other kind of buzzwords that you've heard of in connection with the eclipse. So, we have this crescent sun, and the crescent is getting thinner and thinner, and kind of the two horns of the crescent sun are getting closer and closer as the moon covers up more and more of the sun's disk. At the same time, as the sun gets covered up, we start to see this solar corona emerging around the dark side, the other edge of the moon, the dark edge of the moon. And around about a few seconds before we get to totality, the final bit of the sun that's left exposed, it sort of turns into this sort of single jewel-like glare of sun, And when it's coupled with this ring of the solar corona that is sort of ringing the darkened moon, it really gives this effect of this kind of bright diamond ring in the sky, this bright jewel connected to this ring around the moon. And then as the moon continues to move across the sun, that's when we have the effect that Anna mentioned of these Baily's beads. The very final bits of sunlight that we can see directly, they're actually reaching us through valleys along the edge of the moon's surface. It's kind of odd because when we look at the moon, it does look like this kind of perfect sphere in the sky. But anyone that's looked at the moon with a telescope knows that it's actually full of mountains and valleys, and it's a very rough surface. And the very final bits of sunlight we can see before totality begins. Yes, these little blobs of light that are shining through these valleys. And yes, those are that's the phenomenon of Baily's beads, named after the astronomer who first described them in some detail, who was called Francis Baily, hence Baily's beads. So yeah, the diamond ring and the Baily's beads are the kind of the final two highlights before totality begins.
And I have to say that if you're watching the show and there's any way you can get to totality, it is. I mean, we covered it for National Geographic a couple of years ago, and so I was there, and I had no idea what I was going to see. Like as Graham said, it is an overwhelming experience to see what's going on there. Now, how many? And just out of curiosity, Graham, how many have you seen? How many eclipses have you been to?
Yeah. You know what? That's never a good question for me because there are some great veteran eclipse chasers in in the world who have numbers.
I know, but I want to give
into
people a sense of the time. So you've seen how many over how many years?
So the first eclipse I saw was in 1999. When there was a total eclipse across Europe, went over the UK and France and crossed into Turkey, and it was kind of one of those famous eclipses because it passed over a lot of populous countries, and there is a kind of a 1999 generation of eclipse fanatics who saw their first eclipse in that year. I didn't actually get a chance to do my next total eclipse until 2009, a whole 10 years later, when I was in Shanghai. Unfortunately, that eclipse was very famous for being not just clouded out, but there was just an incredible storm in Shanghai on that morning.
That took all the fun out of it.
So that wasn't the greatest eclipse experience, although in a way, kind of was also something special about it, because one of the things during totality is that you do have this solar corona that the moon doesn't cover. And that is fairly bright. It's about as bright as a full moon. And, anyone that's been out on a good full moon night will know that can give you quite a bit of light. And
that corona's there all the time, right? We just can't see it because the sun is so much brighter than it, right?
Exactly that. Yeah. So once the sun gets covered up, we're left with the solar corona, which still does have, it's about as bright as a full moon, which means that it doesn't go completely dark during totality, unless it's so cloudy and so stormy as it was in Shanghai in 2009, that actually there it does, on those occasions, it does go completely black, which actually was which is a unique thing. And that is, in a way, that's kind of the silver lining to having bad weather at an eclipse, is that you can still get the darkness. And actually you get more darkness when the weather is bad, which is, it's not great compensation. And of course, we hope everybody gets beautiful clear skies on April the 8th. But yeah, the very, very slight consolation of having clouds is that you can get some very spectacular and very dark and very sudden darkness in the middle of the day.
Graham, do you suggest people get away from major cities and areas to get rid of the ambient light? Is it best seen in a dark, dark area?
Well, of course, these things are daytime events. So, I mean, yeah, the normal challenge with astronomy is definitely, right, head out to the country and get away from the lights. Because in an eclipse, it all involves looking at the sun. You don't have that same pressure of having to get to a kind of a dark sky environment. The one thing to be careful of if you are in an urban environment is that there are sometimes random lights that can suddenly turn on during totality. If you're up with some height looking out across a city, then, seeing some lights come on in the city below can be a wonderfully atmospheric addition to totality. But if you have a bright sensor light that you didn't notice until it suddenly comes on just as totality begins, that's not quite so cool.
So the photographers and the people trying to capture this may want to know about that and check out the day before or something like that to see if something happens.
That's right. It's always, if you are in an urban environment, it's always, you're really paying careful attention to any lighting that might come on during totality. But if you know about the lighting and you know where it's going to be, then it is something you can account for and control for. And as for, an urban environment versus a rural environment, it's just really like, it's just like looking at the moon, really. I mean, the moon can look spectacular when it's seen against a city and, seen from that city environment. But it also looks spectacular when you see it out as part of nature as well. So there's really advantages and disadvantages to both kinds of viewing locations.
Josh and Marty both still have questions. Josh?
Yeah, Graham and Anna, we are a tech community. We're into media production. We love our gear. What is the sort of minimal viable product of someone that wants to take advantage or to observe the eclipse? And then if you really want to go all in, what's some good ways to invest in some equipment or to gather things that will be helpful for whenever, for those of us that want to put a little extra effort in?
That's a very good question. I want to really, really champion, you don't really need equipment. You can actually just have a piece of paper, put a hole on it, and project that light through it and watch the eclipse on another piece of paper, like just simple pinhole projector. But I think I was taking pictures of the eclipse in October, the annular eclipse, by putting my eclipse glasses over my mobile phone. So there are really simple ways of doing it, and there are also really complicated ways of doing it. And the way that we do it, we've got a telescope, it's got a camera attached to it, we've got a solar filter there, and it really isn't that complicated even when you do it like that. But the actual name of the equipment, I don't know. Do you know, Graham?
Oh yeah, I mean there is there are thousands of options and different bits of equipment that can be used for it. I think one really helpful resource for people that want to invest in equipment and really want to take it up to the next level. There are fantastic astronomy clubs at many places around the country and around the world. And for this kind of thing, it actually is really crucial to get some proper expert advice on things. For example, if you're going to be using a telescope to view a solar eclipse, then you really do need to know what you're doing. You really do need to have the correct solar filter for that telescope. You really need to know how to make sure it's attached properly and securely to the telescope. Pointing a telescope at the sun, in some ways is just is a very dangerous activity. There are lots of great demonstrations that people have done with telescopes pointed at the sun and the sunlight coming out through the eyepiece and setting fire to pieces of cardboard in a matter of seconds. So actually, I mean, yeah, things like your local astronomy club, which have, experts that can really give you some great advice on this sort of thing, are a really helpful resource for people. And certainly, yeah, using things like telescopes for solar observations shouldn't be done unless you do have a good understanding of what you're doing.
Marty, you want to get in on this?
Yeah, hi, welcome. It's so nice to have you here to talk with us about this. I've taken your advice. I've got my glasses. I've got my solar filter for my cell phone, and I've got my solar binoculars here. Just trying to make sure that we're protected and we can enjoy it as much as possible. And having seen the 2017 one, I was in Idaho and in the middle of nowhere over a flat field. It was the most amazing experience. That we're actually traveling to Texas this year to go and see it as well. But what are the differences? Can you tell us what are the differences between the eclipse this year and the one in 2017? Maybe in terms of the sun's activity, in terms of anything else that we might notice?
I can start it off, yeah, and then I can throw the sciencey bits over to Graham. But so the sun is at a different activity level at this point in time than in 2017. So in 2017, the sun was closer to solar minimum, while the sun this time is closer to solar maximum, and that's going to have an effect on what the corona is going to be looking like, and we can't predict what the corona will look like. And Graham usually has really kind of famously says, like, if you're studying solar eclipses, you don't have a lot of chances. And some things you actually can only study during a solar eclipse. And that is also the corona, right, Graham?
Graham, we love the sciencey bits. Go for it.
Yeah, so there is this 11-year cycle of solar activity. We are heading we think around July 2025. It's interestingly, we don't know for sure when we're going to arrive at the actual peak of this solar activity, but it's going to be sometime in mid 2025. And what that means is that when we look at the sun, we can see more sunspots. We can see more activity around the edge of the sun and prominences and solar flares, and the sun is just a lot more alive and a lot more active. So when all the eyes are going to be on the sun in April this year, that's really as we are getting close to solar maximum. So there should be, with luck, there should be some interesting things to see going on in the sun. Things like sunspots, for example, which can really add a kind of a very nice extra dimension to the eclipse. So yeah, that's definitely one interesting difference between this one and 2017. I think one of the other interesting things is that we don't often get eclipses following on from each other within the same country, quite so closely. I mentioned before that, on average, it's around 400 years between a total solar eclipse at a particular location, which means that, countries, entire countries can go a long time without having a total eclipse. After April, for example, the next big total solar eclipse in the United States will be in 2045. The next total solar eclipse in Mexico will be 2052. We have a long wait within these countries after this eclipse happens. What's interesting about this one is it's coming relatively soon after 2017, which means that there's a lot of enthusiasm still from 2017. There's a lot of collective knowledge from 2017, and there's a lot of lessons learned I mean, everybody, after they've seen a total eclipse, once they've finally calmed down, everybody is full of, well, I should have done this, or I shouldn't have done that, or we got this wrong. We still kind of have all those kind of collective learnings from 2017. So this is actually kind of a great eclipse when people will be able to remember what they should have done last time, and maybe they can apply that better this time round.
So we always get our audience involved. Let's get to their questions. Josh, what's first?
Certainly. Our first question comes from Cody Kirkwood from Dallas, Texas. He has one of those tech questions. What solar eclipse glasses, solar filter, and for a Sony 70 to 200 millimeter G Master lens and solar binoculars would y'all recommend?
Leave that with Graham.
Yes. So I think, recommending specific solar filters for specific equipment, it is always good to actually properly check if there is an officially recommended solar filter for a particular piece of equipment. Some particular telescopes, for example, do have solar filters specially designed for that kind of telescope. So it's always really good to just double check and with the manufacturer or elsewhere to make sure you are getting the proper solar filter for that. One thing
Graham or
with
Annie,
solar eclipse.
I was just going to say, are there communities online where people can go and get into a community where they will know some of these specifics for people's cameras and things like that? Are there any you recommend other than timeanddate.com, and whether you have chats?
Yeah. Well, actually, again, we always have to say that local astronomy clubs are always a tremendous source of advice and help on these things. Just another thought on eclipse glasses is the latest sort of good advice and good practice on eclipse glasses. It used to be checking to see it had the correct certification printed on the glasses. There have been one or two cases of fake eclipse glasses with fake certification being in circulation. So kind of the best advice to people now is to make sure their eclipse glasses or filters from a reputable source. So that would mean a reputable online vendor, a good local astronomy club, a good local science museum, or a source that you trust. And that is the sort of the latest advice on getting hold of solar glasses, solar filters, and so on.
Perfect. Let's go to the next question.
The next one comes in from Aaron Cody from St. Louis, Missouri in the United States. The Office Hours community is planning a significant amount of multi-site live coverage for the upcoming eclipse. What features of timeanddate.com could we use to make our coverage more accurate and or interesting?
I've already taken a look at the site, and the number of animations, the number of access links there is stunning. So if you're interested in really going all out and enjoying this as much as possible, I would highly recommend that. But what's exciting from your guys' point of view?
So this is where Graham has a really cool thing to share. We've got a map that really helps you decide where to go.
Outstanding.
Okay. Oh, okay. That means I need to.
That means you need to share, Graham.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Anna. I need to start doing some work.
I will
Cue
say
the
that
media.
And one of the I think was interesting. I'm on Time and Date right now. I was looking at something else while we were talking, and all the dates for the upcoming total eclipses somewhere in the world. So the next one I believe is in Greenland next year. Is that right? I think in August of next year. And then there's a couple of years. It looks like there's 5 years before we see another one somewhere in the world. And so I think that's what I was underlining before. I'm just filling time while Graham. So Graham, just let us know when you
It's up, I think.
Okay, great. So anyway, but I think that these are we have this spat of total ones that all came between 2017 and now, but that's not normal, and it will spread out.
Absolutely. This is a very kind of special, golden period for eclipses that we are just coming to an end in North America. The kind of resources that can be helpful for groups when they're planning eclipses, either at one location or at multiple locations. So kind of eclipse maps like this can be helpful. This shows the this very narrow band running through the middle of the map. This is the path of totality. This is where the moon appears to completely cover the sun, and we get a total eclipse. In the lighter shaded areas, that's where we will see a partial solar eclipse, where the moon will cover part of the sun, but not all of it. So the first thing to do is to, really know, are you in an area with a partial eclipse, or can you get into this central area where the total eclipse happens? So we can see it here running through Texas, through Arkansas, through Illinois, right up into the northeastern part of the continent there. So that's kind of the first thing. It's the location, and if possible, it's getting into the path of totality, so you can see a total eclipse. At this stage of planning, it's helpful to think about what the weather might be. So one little tool here, for example, is looking at the average cloud cover along the eclipse path. This is taking satellite data from the last 20 years or so, and it's really looking at the chances of there being clear skies on dates around April the 8th. And we can see that, if we're looking at historical records, then, the more south and the more west you are, then historically, the less chances of cloud there will be. So down in Mexico, for example, we have here Mazatlan, which is on the Mexican coast, kind of the first city to see totality. Here, the average cloud cover is around about 28%, or kind of a 28% chance of clear skies on April the 8th. If we go to the other end of the path of totality, up into the northeastern part of the continent, here we are in New Brunswick, in Canada. Here, the average cloud cover has now sort of gone up to more like 75%. So looking at cloud cover can be a helpful planning tool. Of course, it doesn't mean it's going to be cloudy up here in Canada, and it doesn't mean that there's going to be clear skies in Mexico. That's just the historical record, and it could be cloudy everywhere along the path,
or hopefully nowhere.
Or exactly. What we're hoping for, what we're really pushing for, is clear skies everywhere. Location, clouds, then really thinking about the timing of eclipses. So, for example, if we go into a more detailed view, and let's go into a particular location. So, Anna and I and the time and date team are going to be here in Llano, Texas. So we can kind of zoom in here to Llano. We're quite close to the center line of the eclipse here. This center line is the point we talked about earlier, where the more in the middle of the path you are, the longer totality will last. So, for example, at this point, which is very close to the center line, we're looking at about 4 minutes, 30 seconds of totality. As we move towards the edge of the path, either going to the north or to the south, the totality drops down. So here it's gone down to 4 minutes. If we go closer here, it's down to 3 minutes. Still a fairly good duration there, of course. 3 minutes of totality is still absolutely spectacular. When we start to get very close to the edge of the path of totality, then the duration drops down very quickly. So here we are getting pretty close to the northern path limit. We're down to 1 minute 36 seconds. And if we keep zooming in and getting closer and closer, then the duration of totality starts to fall off very quickly. So yeah, location maps like this can be helpful for choosing location. It can also be useful for thinking about timing, because that's the other crucial thing. The first thing is to make sure you're in the right place. The second thing is to make sure you're there at the right time and that you've got all your timings correct. So again, if we go and have a look at Llano here, knowing what time the partial eclipse begins, knowing what time totality is going to begin, those are all really helpful tools for planning things. The other practical detail to think about is if we go into a particular location, also thinking about the direction of the sun and the altitude of the sun. Now, for most of North America, the altitude of the sun is going to be pretty good. It's going to be fairly high in the sky. Here in Texas, for example, it's going to be around about 66, 67 degrees during totality. So nice and high in the sky. But always thinking about the direction the sun is going to be in. It's going to be, exactly due south around totality, because it's around the middle of the day in local time when totality happens. So yeah, other planning things to think about is thinking about where the sun is going to be, making sure you have really good lines of sight, that there's going to be nothing getting in the way, thinking of power cables, thinking of trees, anything that might suddenly start to get in the way of things. These tools can be useful for thinking and for planning that side of things as well. So yeah, really getting as much information, as much data as possible is kind of the secret to planning. Just one.
We have a lot of questions stacked up here. Josh, do you have a last quick one before
actually, just one quick thing.
Go ahead. Sure, absolutely, Graham.
Also, of course, cloud coverage, average cloud coverage is useful. But also, weather forecasts. This tool from 14 days before the eclipse starts to feature kind of weather forecasts as well. And of course, that's a super helpful tool. Once we really get into the final countdown to April the 8th.
Absolutely.
I was actually going to ask you about the weather forecasting cloud. Would you consider that a tool that would be useful in maybe figuring out whether to put your tent up beforehand, or is it something that you could see a forecast for tomorrow that, hey, maybe I'll jump over to this other window that has a better looking forecast to try and observe the eclipse?
Yeah. So, we sort of start to get in the weather forecasts from about 14 days out. And, at 14 days out, there can be a lot of variability in the forecast. Obviously, as we get closer, the forecasts get more and more likely. So certainly, yes. We've used weather forecasts from 1 or 2 days out to make last minute decisions about relocating. That's really where the weather forecasts come in handy. So yeah, having plan Bs, plan Cs, in the event of the weather forecasts being bad 2 or 3 days out is really, really good planning tools as well.
Let's go on to the next question.
And our next question from Dan Huber from Erie, PA in the USA. Our university is hosting 3 locations to view, and we will have what they call a solar window setup. What is a solar window?
I don't know.
I'm just looking at this one. So we got 3 locations, and
I think
It's
that a
solar
solar window
windows.
is I believe the solar window is kind of projecting it through a pinhole over a larger space. I think that that's what, when I was growing up, when we did solar, we did some partial eclipses that way. But I'm not sure
Right.
how that works with totality.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering if it might be something.
Because I know
like
we
that.
built
Yeah,
one
there are-
where we had a pinhole and then we had this huge whiteboard that we built for one where we could all look at it, from that perspective.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a camera obscura type setup where you're pinholing it onto a surface so everybody can enjoy it together in a group.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Next
Yeah.
question.
Next one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What audio changes occur during an eclipse? Would you want to avoid crowds to hear any changes?
I'm fascinated with this question because we were talking about it on the show not long ago that if you're out in flora and fauna, all of a sudden things sound different.
Yeah, so this is like, for me, this is magic. You don't want to cut out this audio. You want to capture this audio. There's going to be dogs barking, there's going to be birds flying, there's going to be people going wow, and that's all part of the experience and that kind of collective magic that the eclipse does. It's really, really, really spine tingling stuff that really just makes you stop up and react. And I would not want to filter out that audio. I would want to collect it and bottle it and listen to it at any time I could listen to it.
That's really a lovely thought. The solar eclipse as a humanity connector through shared experience, big time. Let's go to the next question.
Al Hammond from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. You seem to have seen many eclipses. What is your favorite eclipse moment that you have experienced?
Ooh, either one of you.
No, I think that's you too, isn't it, Anna?
Well, my first eclipse moment, and I think I've beaten you to an eclipse, Graham. I lived in New Orleans in the early 80s. I think it was 1984, and there was an eclipse. And I was young. I think I was 5 or 6, and I was looking. And it was the shadows, the shapes of the shadows, and the kind of, it was almost like the air was vibrating, and it was a really kind of, and I can hardly remember the details of it, but I can just remember the feeling of being part of something really big and being like a really tiny piece of the universe. So for me, that kind of really sat with me, and I didn't realize how much that sat with me until I saw that total solar eclipse with Graham on a rooftop in Argentina in 2018, was it? 2019?
2019.
Very cool. Let's go to the next question.
Graham McFarlane from Boston, Massachusetts, next writes in, have you ever witnessed an eclipse on a mountain or somewhere where you have a distant view of the horizon? Would you see beyond the moon's shadow?
It's interesting. I actually thought the same thing. You said it's going to be high, which means that the background for the eclipse for photographers and things like that will mostly be open sky, I would imagine, this time, as opposed to having something down on the horizon where you might get mountain peaks and things like that. Am I projecting that, or is that real?
Yeah, this is a great question. We saw on the map that path of totality is really narrow. It's about 120 miles wide, and that does mean that is the dark part of the moon's shadow. 120 miles wide, and we can often see to the horizon beyond 120 miles. So during totality, if you have a nice view to the horizon, you can see the edge of the moon's shadow. You can have, a dark sky above you, but then in the distance around the horizon, you can see sunlight, which is, sunlight coming from outside the moon's shadow. So that can be a really nice effect during totality if you have a nice view to the horizon. And in terms of mountains, this eclipse is happening. Eclipses always begin at sunrise somewhere, and they always end at sunset somewhere. In this case, it's starting at sunrise in the Pacific and ending at sunset in the Atlantic. So this time, no one really has a kind of a sunrise or sunset eclipse. But in other eclipses, if the eclipse coincides with sunrise or sunset, that's also a spectacular feature. The Argentina eclipse that Anna mentioned, that happened very late in the afternoon local time. So soon after totality, during the second partial phase, the eclipsed sun set behind the Andes, and that was the moon, the sun, everything in astronomy always looks very different when it's down near the horizon. And eclipses are no different. So yeah, seeing things framed against the horizon or framed against mountains can be amazing.
Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies, and Trinidad and Tobago. I'm in Trinidad, all the way down there next to Venezuela. We are literally 1 or 2 bands width completely outside the eclipse zone. What will we see the moon looking like at crescent?
If you're totally outside, yeah.
Right. So a partial eclipse kind of stretches down, right to the bottom of the North American continent, right down to Panama. But South America really does just miss out on this eclipse. So nothing to see in South America in April the 8th. Did just have a quick check ahead, and in Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, the next total solar eclipse is coming up in 2045. So you got just over 20 years to wait. But in 2045, August the 12th, the path of totality will cross Trinidad and Tobago and part of the Venezuelan coast. 21 years to wait, I'm afraid.
So you got 21 years to get the perfect vacation rental all set up in advance, put your deposit down, and you're going to be ready. Let's go to the next question.
Next one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Are there any tricks to filming a pinhole camera during an eclipse? Any other tricks to filming an eclipse?
We've talked a bit about these, using projections for eclipses, and these can be really spectacular. And I've seen very nice time lapse photos of the pinhole effects. Also some nice video of the growing partial eclipse projected. So I think in that case it's one thing to think about always with these things is that the sun and the moon, the moon is moving across the sun, but the sun is also moving across the sky as well. So getting something set up for a nice pinhole projection with a nice camera at one point of the eclipse might not be the optimum positioning for it as the eclipse develops. So again, I think for all of these things, it's thinking about where the sun is going to be moving across the sky, and having a nice setup that will work throughout the duration of the eclipse.
But also just filming people's faces, filming dogs going crazy, filming the shadows, all that energy, all that stuff. You can just pick up your mobile phone and just pan it around, and you are filming an eclipse. You are filming people's reaction to the eclipse. I know I harp on about this, but it really is. Never forget to be there in the moment while you're trying to capture this as well. It's really rich coming from someone who has to sit behind a desk and live stream the eclipse at the same time. But it really is. Don't forget to be there and see it for yourself.
Such good advice, because some of the best B-roll shots I've ever got is looking at the kid looking at something and watching the amazement on their face as they go through that. So there's lots of opportunities here. People will be going through an experience that may be once in a lifetime for them. Next question.
Next one's from Douglas Carmichael. What safety glasses would you recommend, and how would you protect the camera sensor when filming?
Well, we've talked a lot about glasses. eclipse glasses from a reputable person, source, someone you know that you can trust, from science museums, from astronomy clubs, because there are some fakes going on around there. So just know where you're getting things from is really important.
And just as it will hurt your eyes, I would assume if you just pop your iris open and leave it there, when the sun comes back out of the eclipse, there's a good chance that you could, depending on your camera type, the sensor type, and the rest of that, do some permanent damage to things. So you have to be mindful of that.
You have to be really mindful of that because the sun gets concentrated in there and it can melt bits and stuff. So it's a really, really good idea to just make sure that you get the proper filters that belong to your camera, just like Graham said. And astronomy clubs, science museums usually have coordinators there. There's observatories, if you're lucky enough to have one in your neighborhood. They all have knowledge about these things.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones is back from Madison, Indiana. Do children have better reactions to an eclipse than adults? Who would you film?
Well, that's an interesting thing. We were just talking about that a minute ago. And so what would either of you do to prepare a young person that you might be with watching the eclipse to give them a sense of what's going on so they can just understand how special this is?
Well, we actually did a little presentation in Roswell at a local school there when we were there for live streaming the annular solar eclipse. And Graham had some really good questions that he asked the kids about to kind of get a grip of understanding the distance and how eclipses work, didn't you, Graham?
Right. I mean, one thing that can be helpful is, eclipses are a great excuse to talk about science and to talk about the solar system. Eclipses do hinge on this kind of amazing coincidence that the sun and the moon are pretty much exactly the same size in the sky. It's always difficult to kind of comprehend just what a coincidence that is. It means that, because they're the same size, it means that, if the sun is X times bigger than the moon, it's also X times further away. It's kind of some simple geometry.
And that only happens with the sun and the moon in the solar system, right? I mean, there's no other perfect lineup that we know of.
Right. It's certainly in the solar system, this is a completely unique coincidence. And, the amazing thing is that, this number, this X number, it's 400. The sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, plus it's 400 times further away. That really is a, remarkable coincidence. And, as Anna mentioned, we did some exercises with these school children. If the moon is this big, how big is the sun? How far away is the sun? And they're incredible numbers. I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, even for astronomers who know these numbers, it's still it's tricky to really appreciate, the coincidence that goes into this. So yeah, always a good excuse to, get young people thinking, and adults too, to get them thinking about the solar system.
Got two more questions to go through. Next one, please.
Kenny Grizzle from Longview, Texas. I downloaded an iPad app yesterday that has rehearsal modes to prepare. Where is the optimum place to view the eclipse? I plan to view it from a royal family cemetery in northeastern Texas, dodging problems with trespass and private property or congestion.
I don't think we're going to give you legal advice, but Nigel, do you have a quick thought? And then let's go to our experts here.
I think they've given very good advice. Great show today. I'm particularly impressed you picked Llano, which is right in the middle of Texas wine country, to do this. So congratulations on your placement. I live just a little out of that in Austin. And so my question was, if I go onto my balcony at sort of the right time today, which is about 12:15 lunchtime, and I can see the sun, is that roughly where it's going to be for the eclipse?
Oh, that's a great question. Roughly, yes. But we do have to remember that the sun does rise in a slightly different place every day. We always say the sun rises in the east. In fact, it only rises exactly in the east at the equinox and at other times it rises a bit north or a bit south of that. So yeah, the sun's path across the sky does vary and will change between now and April. But yeah, going out now, and if you know a location, starting to get an idea now of where the sun is rising, where it's passing around midday. That's certainly helpful. But it is going to be slightly different come April.
Our last question.
Marty Atias from Maryland, USA, and here on the panel, how would you test that a filter is suitable?
So for either eye viewing or photo or something, is there a simple way?
Yes, and the simple way is to, if you're not sure where the filter came from, and if you're not sure if the filter is from a reputable source, then really the only thing to do is to not use it. In theory, filters can be tested in various ways to check their effectiveness. But the big message that really we should give out to everybody is that if you don't know exactly where that filter came from, if you don't know that it came from a trustworthy source, then you shouldn't be using it.
Graham, Annie, it's such a pleasure to have you here. It's been a privilege for you to stop by. I know all of us are very excited about what's going to be happening, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Remember, there's tons of resources on timeanddate.com, so check that out. I've been really impressed with how thorough their coverage is. And as always, here on Office Hours, our thanks to our producers, all of you who put questions into the mix. We literally can't do this show without you. You've asked, again, fabulous questions, and we rely on you to come through every single day. To the panelists who show up every day, we appreciate your efforts too. This is an all-volunteer operation, and for literally 1,400 plus days, we've been gathering here every morning, and people have been volunteering to come in and answer questions, along with our amazing back-end crew, the people who are behind the scenes that Graham and Annie met today as they were prepping them for coming on. There's a huge community behind the scenes. We hope that if you are interested in the show and you want to get involved in that you may want to come in and be a volunteer to help us produce this every day. Big things coming up, but that takes care of us for today. The Tlaloc Traversal, if you were to have to go and talk to all the people who asked questions today, 33,000 miles, 53,000 kilometers. And that equals 260 million bananas for scale. See you tomorrow.
That was great.
Great.
Fabulous, both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If we end up in
Hey,
the
thank you.
The sun and the moon.
We're excited about working with you guys on April the 8th, and because we know you're going to be getting some great pictures coming in.
We're really excited. And we may have a couple telescopes there, where we're at that are doing different spectral ranges, and so we'll make sure that we get those fed to you as well. And then we can't wait to see your feeds as well. So I think it's going to be a great trade-off back and forth.
And it's going to be a great dress rehearsal for 2026, which
in
you
Greenland,
mentioned
right?
there as well, Alex. Yeah.
I can't wait. I've always wanted to go to Greenland, and now I'm going to get to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right.
See everybody.
Fabulous.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming.